What's going on, here, Ned? Welcome back to the channel. For today's video, let's train your eyes to take better photos. So without further ado, let's get to it. All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. Hope all is well and having a beautiful day wherever you are. Now, for today's video, I want to show you how to train your eyes to take better photos. Now, I know I've been gone for a while, life's been busy and everything, been traveling a lot. And speaking about travel, I just went on a trip with my family to Spain, took a bunch of photos and everything, showed it to a couple people, but one guy in particular was like, it must be nice. You know, you have it so easy, you have the eye, you have a nice camera, your photos are just really nice for what they are. And immediately I was like, bro, there's no way I had this eye naturally. You know, I had to practice a bunch of times. I had to build myself up to the point where a lot of trial and error. I had a lot of bad photos. Throughout the trip, I still kind of had about a bunch of bad photos. Without further ado, what I wanted to do today is show you 16 photos when I went to Spain. You know, just show you exactly what I'm actually looking for when I'm on those streets, just to show you, and as well as, have ways for you to practice of what you're trying to look for when you're out on the streets as well. So without further ado, let's get started. All right, so let's dive in. Here's my iPad. I got 16 photos that are particularly my favorites. And in no particular order, what I want to do is just, show you and mark the things that I'm actually looking for when I'm actually taking these photos. So let's dive in. This specific photo is probably one of my favorites out of everything, just because it's an action shot, but also how simple it is when I actually took this photo. As you can see, you already know immediately what the subject is in the photo, and that's just because of these leading lines. So as you can see right here, this spotlight makes it so much easier to actually show you where the subject is right in the middle. But why I like this even more is just because how simple it is and how immediately you see the subject. So as you can see, there's this conical shape. Personally speaking, when I see this photo, it's just pleasant to see because this conical shape kind of creates this symmetry in a sense when you see this composition. So when I draw this line down the photos, you can see specifically how easy it is to see the subject, where it's actually placed in the composition. When I took this photo, it took a couple tries just because, I really was waiting for that moment when he was directly in the middle for this actual shot, because this guy's dancing around, moving about and everything. So, and I think personally speaking, less is more when you're taking these types of photos. It's just very nice to be able to capture this action and composition very nicely. That being said, that's why I personally was looking for this specific photo in an action shot. Now, moving on to this specific photo, I like this a lot because of the simplicity, but also because of the lines that are kind of invisible in this actual photo. What I mean by that, there are diagonal lines. So this here specifically is angled at a certain point where it's just so nicely placed. I personally like this a lot because personally for me, the rule odds, which is like, the science is worked out where, you see things that are like more, I guess, pleasant to the eye, and 3 is a really magic number. So as you can see, there's 1 here, 1 here, and 1 here. And I personally like that a lot because it's just so pleasant to be able to see this diagonal line going across, as you can tell. And as you can see in this actual photo, there's other lines that you can see. There are like vertical lines down the middle, as you can see. And there are actually even more lines themselves at the bottom. So these tiles help you diverge to see what the subjects are. Literally these tables and chairs. Obviously for me, it's kind of a simple photo because it's not that hard to find. But being able to angle yourself specifically in ways where you can capture these types of photos is what you specifically are looking for when you're taking them. So pretty much this types of lines that I'm looking for, these vertical lines, the diagonal lines, and this rule of thirds really helps you capture this, simple photos that has kind of a lot going on as well. This one, I was walking about in the streets. I personally like this a lot because, this is kind of your everyday person. This person is bike riding around the city and everything. And I like this a lot because how simple it is, but also the amount of lines that are leading to the subject, but also how it's composed as well of where it's actually going. So as you can see, there's this giant line that's going across all the way into the photos. So you can immediately kind of just, at least for me, I particularly see my eyes going towards these. So because of that, I immediately see the subject coming here. And in this rule of thirds and everything, this composition, this specifically is the location where I saw him coming into the frame. you know, you got to be a little discreet and everything, but that's particularly something I really like how it was placed and everything. This specifically in the photo of where I'm actually looking for, where the subject goes and how it's placed is specifically, I particularly like this specific thing. So these are the types of lines that I'm actually looking for a photo like this. Now, this one, I don't know. I thought this guy looked super badass. You know, this guy's like smoking a cigarette and everything. This is on the streets. I love this. It's just the shadows really worked out, the way he was looking, where he was placed. You know, if you just draw directly a line down here, he's directly in the middle. Why I like this one specifically, there's a bunch of vertical lines. These pillars here specifically are something that I really like a lot. Let me change a different color. These pillars are really, really nice to see. These trees, this giant pillar that he's standing on. You know, all these are all vertical lines that you particularly can see in the photo. The lines help you draw you to the subject. So there are these vertical lines, these diagonal lines, and these leading lines that help you draw you to the subject. And because of these diagonal lines and these vertical lines and where they're like converging, this helps you really draw close to one, the depth of the photo, but also the actual subject of where it's being placed. All in all, for this specific one, it's such a simple photo as well, as you can kind of see the trend of my photos, but you can see all these types of lines in the photos that helps you draw you to the subject right in the middle. You know, you can use these types of rules that are just meant to be used in a sense. So what I mean by that is, let me just change this color. As you see, like for all these photos, you can kind of see this whole entire thing right down the middle. I particularly always find myself, I don't know, naturally find it nice to see them in these lines right here. So if you keep them on these types of lines, you're pretty much Gucci. It's really nice to have in the corners, these little converging lines, all these things. If you have this other line here, I don't know. This is for me, something really nice for what I'm looking for. This photo, I really like a lot as well. You know, all these are my favorites, so what am I saying? But this specifically is really cool because, you know, I'm playing around with the composition and the backgrounds, as well as an action shot, and seeing what the actual subject is in this photo. As I mentioned before, you're using a bunch of lines. So you have some diagonal lines here going across because of this table. You got all these things happening with this symmetry from the actual like spools of strings. What I like about this is because of the subject here, you know, when you're putting these lines down the middle, you know, you can kind of see what I'm actually looking for. You know, here's the actual subject. Right here is like, I'm following this line. If you particularly want to go down the middle, here's also the subject as well, where she's actually sewing something onto these postcards. Because there's so many different types of lines, there's this one line here personally that just draws straight across that allows you to go to the subject even more. These are the types of stuff that I particularly would recommend to look for when you're taking these photos. This was a great part of my trip. We went on a boat and everything was going around and about. And I like this one. I captured this as we're going to the boat. There's stuff in the background, as you can see in the way back and the straight vertical, this horizontal line. There's this, as you can kind of see the trend, there's this diagonal line. And because of this diagonal line and these other diagonal lines going across, it immediately draws you to this subject as well. So let's draw these lines once again. As you can see, this whole entire subject of the boat is directly in this specific line right here. It doesn't matter how big the subject is, as long as you're kind of drawing something like in here or just like this whole general spot. I personally think it'll help you compose the subject and compose the actual image in a more pleasant way. I didn't make the science. This is just a way you can actually see the actual photo in a nice way. And the colors worked out as well. There's some yellows, there's some greens, there's some blues in the back. And you can just definitely see all this type of stuff where, you know, there's a lot of repetition that also helps in these tiles on the actual ground. So leading lines, these compositions, the diagonal lines, the vertical lines, as you can see from the houses in the back, you know, makes the photo a little more pleasant and just a lot more, I guess, pretty when you see it. Next up, there's nothing crazy about it. This one is specifically just the waves when I was on the boat. But why I love this, I don't know, for this one, it's just so serene when I see it. And you can definitely see the curved and diagonal lines and the, like, I guess the repetition that's happening in this photo. So that's what I'm looking for when I'm taking this shot. So you can see this curved line, these like waves and everything. You could see this repetition in the waves. And as you can see, because of these wave lines, it kind of creates this diagonal, this appearance in the photo as well. And you can see the waves in the back, as you can see like down here and here. What I like about waves and just ocean photos specifically as well, there's a lot of repetition. So you could see there's just like so much going on as waves look like when you see them on the beach or the lake or whatever. So I particularly like this because of how this creates like a lot of depth. So you can see the bubbles in here. You can see all these types of converging lines that kind of help from the waves to, create an illusion of depth. In this particular photo, if you're looking at waves, you're like a beach photographer or water or something of this sorts, repetition, simplicity, like symmetry to a certain extent, converging lines, and a lot of curved lines really help you draw you to, I guess there's no really subject in here in a sense, but just the appearance of what this photo is actually capturing. That's what I'm looking for in this photo. I think personally, as you can kind of see the theme of my photos, I like simplicity. I like just serenity and peace, I guess, in a sense of these photos itself. So as you can see, if we do the lines themselves again here, you draw this down the middle, as you can see, one like here and one over here. This specifically is the area of what I was actually looking for. There's some shadows going on. There's different types of like, I guess, contrast that's going on. There's vertical lines going on here. There's vertical lines going down here on the actual window itself. I guess creating some depth to the actual photo is this specific area of these shadows. So this kind of helps as well. The everyday thing that you see in Spain, the windows, the buildings and stuff, just the way the light shines, the way this creating the shadows where you see this giant thing here, but it creates this symmetry down the middle. When I saw it, I immediately stopped and I took that just so I can actually capture the simplicity of this actual image of a window. Kind of simple in itself, but the way you're filling the frame specifically, you're creating boxes, you're creating circles, you're filling in specific areas, you're touching on these actual lines that the guidelines that are actually on your cameras most of the time. You touch these, you put them in the middle, you put it on these like intersections and everything, and just like, no matter how big the subject is. Personally, I think that's the simplest way to elevate your photos, just to get you started, to make it more elevated to a certain extent. This one's a crazy one. I like this because Spain is very known for their oranges and everything, and like the products they use with their oranges. Why I like this specifically a lot is the repetition. You see all the oranges going on every single place in this actual photo. There's a lot of like filling the frame of this actual photo, and there's a lot of depth. What I'm actually looking for, I particularly framed my subject from a different angle so I can fill this whole entire thing. A lot of things are getting busy, but you can particularly see, since it's in the middle, this specific area of the oranges. I think the amount of repetition that's going on with the leaves, the oranges, the greens, you can see stuff in the specific foreground over here and also in the background over there. You see the depth of where this line is actually going. I think when you're taking these types of photos, the important here is the filling the frame. It's the converging invisible line that's creating the depth of this actual photo, and the repetition. Just like waves, like a lot of things like this creates a lot of repetition. There's a lot of things going on. Particularly, you're not looking at one specific main subject like the other photos that I showed you. Because there's so much going on, technically you kind of just see the middle. That's what I kind of look for, but also other things that are happening everywhere else in this photo to create that illusion in a sense. Moving on, this one is super trippy in my eyes. That's why I really like this one a lot, just because of how symmetrical, how the actual thing is framed, the whole thing, the whole composition of this photo is filled. There's a lot of like repetition and a lot of, I guess, diagonal lines you can kind of see if you just directly look in the center. It's kind of trippy when you look at it. And that's kind of why I want to show you this one. As you can see, this architect did a great job. You just draw this line down the middle. This is directly in the center. Why I like this? So much repetition. So you got this these little like, I don't know, I guess these are like little castle things, images. And why I like this even more is the fact that he does this across this whole entire thing. Like you see these trapezoids, or what are these? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hexagons in a sense. You know, it goes across in giant circles. You just keep doing this, all the same pattern. And it's just it's so simple. There's so much repetition that when you're looking at this, you definitely like want to be in the middle to be able to capture this whole entire ceiling. It makes me appreciate the amount of symmetry, what's going on, of what they're actually looking for. Everything that's actually going on in this photo it's just right. It's just so simple. This particularly, I really liked a lot too, because this kind of reminds me like of a Korean drama or something. This helps a lot because I think this specifically shows you like converging lines and leading lines very, very well with some symmetry and as well as just some diagonal lines as well. What I mean by that, these lines, as you can see from these bushes, creates this converging line that moves closer and closer together to be able to see this specific image. So, which is the subject, which is directly in the middle, which is the door. I don't know, when you draw these lines one more time here, this is directly in the middle, these bushes go straight down there. As soon as you look at it, you look at the door. You don't look at these things in the foreground. You don't look so much into the background on the side. You see directly right in the subject, which is this door. When I see it, I think it's pretty cool to see this specific composition. You know, if you do these lines one more time for every single photo that I'm doing, there's some symmetry. Like if you cut this in half and you put this on this side, it's perfectly symmetrical in my personal opinion. It took some time to actually angle myself to make this way, but as you can see, it's just something that you can see that's straight out of a fairy tale. And I particularly loved how pretty this looked with all the bushes in the back, you know, this like, I guess, trees and leaves that are growing around the door itself. This was a castle or some royal castle that I went to. I think it was pretty cool just to see like around the buildings when you're going around different angles, you see the thought process, I guess, when people are developing these types of areas. So I think when I captured this photo, I really liked how I framed these lines to converge right indirectly to create the depth to show you this subject in the middle. I think we're almost halfway or a little more over halfway. Pretty much similar to the first one, which is exactly the same show that I looked at. I like this one a lot. The same exact reasons why I want to show you, as you can kind of get the idea, are these leading lines. Right here, as I mentioned before, it's converging right directly in the middle, this conical area. This guy is just playing the guitar, and I liked how this is composed because, you know, when you do this right across, this is a terrible, lines. I particularly put him down the middle, like in this specific bottom right corner, like right here. I think it depends on how you want to frame your actual subject in your photos. I like to kind of play around in different areas. My eyes go towards like this area, and this area, and obviously dead center. You know, this specific area is my favorite, and this specific area is also my favorite when I'm composing these photos. I think this is just such a simple photo to be able to just print and be like, this is the essence of like a moody type of photo. This was cool. This one was a dope one. I like this one a lot. All right, so this was a garden. This one, as I mentioned before, as you kind of gain the gist of, you know, the previous photos, converging lines, leading lines, diagonal lines, rule of thirds, you know, rule of odds, all this repetition and stuff. All these types of things are exactly all at one time of what I'm looking for. As you can see, these converging lines draws you directly, as I mentioned before, to the subject right directly in the middle. So right here, if I draw this line, you see the subject of this giant castle right in the middle. I think that's pretty cool of how the way I was trying to finagle myself was using this rooftop to be able to see this actual castle. Particularly for me, I like this even more because of the stuff that's going on in the foreground. So there's this diagonal symmetrical pots and plants that are on the actual buildings. There's stuff here, which makes a little more of an interesting look of this giant plant that's much closer. What helps a lot specifically is the amount of depth that's actually being created. So because I have something in the foreground, because there's the subject all the way in the background, and because of these converging lines of these rooftops going directly to the subject, that helps you, go directly into the middle, which is obviously something easy to always capture, something always in the middle. But because of these lines that are helping, because of the stuff that's in the whole entire background, and I mean the foreground, it helps a lot to be able to capture and compose what's actually going on in this photo. All right, same thing, same exact concept. Let's try it again. Let's put these things down here. This is, as I mentioned before, directly on that line that I really like a lot. Use the lines. That's pretty much what I'm saying. Use the lines, put something in the foreground. It's right, as you can see, this thing over here. As you can also mention before, there are a bunch of diagonal lines. So the actual window frame itself is a bunch of lines there. There's some over here, some vertical lines here, and there's directly, and this also over here, this diagonal line, a vertical line. And I like this a lot as well, not because of the lines specifically, but the shadows. So you can definitely see some lights that are going across, but this whole entire, I guess, division right here is what made me like it a lot because of the shadows. Some darks in the background, the foreground, some lights in the background, and you can see the shadows especially that's created from the actual windowsill. I particularly, when I see this photo, when I'm actually drawing these lines, for you guys, these are the types of things that I'm looking for, these everyday adventures you can capture on your camera. All right, let's practice again. What do you see? Basically, I'm looking for here is the same exact thing. This one I like a lot because of the symmetry. Go directly down the middle, boom, straight down. Love this a lot because of that. Because of this, there's symmetry as well. Obviously, I wish it was a little bit more symmetrical where this has 3, but this one has 2. It is what it is, but particularly I like this because of how super symmetrical this came out to be. There's not much going on, but there's still a lot of going on with the shadows, the lights, the highlights on this side, but the shadows are on this side. If you're looking for buildings and you really like architecture, I think like when you see corners specifically and you see this actual look of the building specifically like that, I think that's pretty cool. Personally speaking, I think it's pretty pleasant to the eye. That's pretty much the end of the day. All my photos, I like to just be pleasant when I'm taking these travel photos. Be in peace, be in a mode where I could see and appreciate the things that are actually going around rather than always taking just random phone photos. All right, last but not least, this photo when I was in Madrid. This one was a nice one because there's exactly everything that I'm actually looking for that I explained in all the other photos. So when I'm drawing these lines, as I did before, this sign is directly in here. There's some repetition, specifically some symmetry of like this specific window over here. And why I like this even more is the curve. There's like every single type of line. You got the vertical lines going on this whole entire building. Over here in the windowsill, you got all these curved lines going on specifically over here from the road, which draws you specifically to this part of the actual image. And last but not least, what I like about this even more are all these intricate other lines, these diagonal lines that are happening as well. There's just a lot of going on that creates a lot of depth in the photo, which draws you to the subject on this right side and into the foreground area rather than all the way into the background. When you're looking at these types of photos, I particularly like this type of composition a lot. Putting stuff into this specific area, creating this whole entire leading way to this place of this actual part of the photo is very, very helpful in my personal opinion. When you're out and about, I think being able to see all these types of lines in the way in is pretty much going to help you elevate it. As soon as you see it, it's just gonna be like, oh, this is really nice. I like this. You frame the shot, all that type of jazz. And then when you look back, you're like, wow, I'm pretty surprised that my eyes actually are able to see this now. All right, guys, with that being said, hope you enjoyed today's video. At the end of the day, like I said before, all these types of lines, the converging lines, all that type of jazz really help you a lot. Take some time. I think learning about the science of how people take photos that are just pleasing to the eye really helps you as well. These are the types of things that just come naturally just because of how much I practice with these types of lines and the depth that I'm actually trying to create. But at the end of the day, sometimes rules are meant to be broken. All these types of things that I'm teaching you is just a point of advice. At the end of the day, what matters to you is you. It's your opinion. If you like the photos, that's it. It doesn't matter. Without further ado, if you like this video, give it a like. I'd really appreciate it. It helps this channel, especially this whole YouTube algorithm. If you got any questions, comment down below. I love to chat. You know, I love to share some photos with you eventually along lines. Let's start a conversation. I love to chat with you. Comment down below. Now, with that being said, if you like this type of stuff, you like these tutorials, the things that I'm teaching you and everything, I'd love to have you hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take it easy, and God bless. Peace out, guys. Shoo. Peace out, guys.